What would you do if the world judged you before you could even speak? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud as Dr. Amara Ellis settled into her first-class seat on Flight 392, bound for Chicago. Her fingers traced the edge of her leather briefcase, the weight of her new role as lead attorney for Horizon Airlines grounding her. At 38, she'd fought her way through courtrooms and boardrooms, her sharp mind and unyielding spirit carving a path where others saw only barriers. But today, the weight of her skin felt heavier than her title. The cabin hummed with the low buzz of pre-flight chatter. Amara adjusted her silk blazer, her eyes scanning the legal brief she'd prepared for a critical meeting with the airline's board. Her promotion had been a triumph, a testament to years of outworking and outsmarting those who underestimated her. She was used to skeptical glances, the subtle stiffening of shoulders when she entered a room. But this flight was supposed to be a moment of peace, a brief pause before the storm of corporate negotiations. The plane hadn't even taxied when two uniformed officers boarded, their boots heavy on the carpeted aisle. The hum of conversation died. Amara's pulse quickened, an instinct honed by years of navigating spaces where she was the only black woman present. She kept her eyes on her papers, willing herself to stay calm, but the officers' gazes locked onto her like a spotlight. "Ma'am," one of them said, his voice clipped, "we need you to come with us." Amara's head snapped up. The officer, a stocky man with a buzz cut, loomed over her seat. His partner, younger, with a nervous twitch in his jaw, stood a step behind. The passengers around her shifted, their curiosity sharp and invasive. "Excuse me." Amara's voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "May I ask what this is about?" The first officer's eyes narrowed. "We received a report of a disturbance. You need to exit the aircraft now." A disturbance? Amara's mind raced. She hadn't spoken to anyone since boarding, hadn't even raised her voice. Her seatbelt was still fastened, her tray table stowed. The absurdity of it hit her like a slap. "There must be a mistake," she said, her tone firm but polite. "I'm a passenger in good standing, and I'm not causing any disturbance." The second officer shifted uncomfortably, but the first one leaned closer, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered gun. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult. Get up, or we'll remove you." The cabin was silent now, every eye on her. Amara felt the familiar sting of being singled out, the weight of assumptions pressing down. She was a black woman in first class apparently. That was disturbance enough. Her years of legal training kicked in, her mind sharpening like a blade. She wouldn't let this moment define her as a victim. "Officers," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry. "I'm Dr. Amara Ellis, lead attorney for Horizon Airlines. I'm not going anywhere until you provide a valid reason for this request. And I'll need your names and badge numbers." The first officer blinked, caught off guard. His partner's eyes widened, and a murmur rippled through the cabin. Amara's words weren't just a defense. They were a challenge, a line drawn in the sand. She wasn't just a passenger, she was the airline's legal powerhouse, and she knew her rights. The first officer recovered quickly, his jaw tightening. "We don't need to explain ourselves to you. Get up now." Amara's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rage simmering beneath her composure. She thought of her grandmother, who'd marched in Selma, who'd taught her to stand tall even when the world tried to push her down. She thought of every time she'd been followed in a store, questioned in a meeting, dismissed because of her skin. This wasn't just about her, it was about every person who'd been judged before they could speak. "I'm not moving," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You're on Horizon Airlines property, and I'm the lead attorney for this company. You'll provide your badge numbers, or I'll ensure this incident is escalated to the highest levels of law enforcement oversight." The second officer hesitated, glancing at his partner. The passengers were no longer just watching. Some were filming, their phones raised like silent witnesses. The first officer's face reddened, his authority slipping. "You're making a scene," he hissed. "No," Amara said, her eyes locked on his. "You are." The standoff stretched, taut and electric. Then, a new voice broke the silencia flight attendant. Her name tag, reading Lila, stepped forward. "Officers, I'm the senior crew member here. There's been no disturbance reported by the crew. I think there's a misunderstanding." The first officer turned on her, but Lila held her ground, her expression calm but resolute. Amara felt a flicker of gratitude. Lila's intervention was a lifeline, a reminder that not everyone saw her as a threat. The officers exchanged a glance, their confidence faltering. The second one muttered something about checking the report, and they stepped back, retreating to the front of the plane. Amara didn't move, her heart still racing, her brief still clutched in her hands. The passengers' stares lingered, some sympathetic, others judgmental. She wanted to scream, to demand why her presence in first class was so unthinkable, but she held her silence. She'd learned long ago that dignity was her strongest weapon. Minutes later, the officers returned, their expressions sour. "We're letting you stay," the first one said, as if granting her a favor. "But watch yourself." Amara's eyes didn't waver. "Your badge numbers," she repeated. The second officer rattled off their names and numbers, his voice low. Amara committed them to memory, her legal mind already drafting the complaint she'd file. The officers left the plane, and the cabin slowly returned to its pre-flight hum. Lila approached, her voice soft. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Ellis. That shouldn't have happened." Amara nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you for stepping in." As the plane took off, Amara stared out the window, the clouds blurring into a sea of white. She thought of the meeting ahead, the board members who'd likely never face what she just had. She thought of the countless others who'd been dragged from planes, stores, or streets, their voices silenced. Her anger wasn't just for herself, it was for them. When she landed in Chicago, Amara didn't go straight to her meeting. She sat in the airport lounge, her laptop open, drafting a formal complaint to the airline and the local police department. She detailed every moment, every word, her prose sharp and unyielding. But she didn't stop there. She wrote a proposal for Horizon Airlines, outlining mandatory training on implicit bias and de-escalation for all staff and contracted security. She knew change wouldn't come easily, but she'd learned to fight battles others thought unwinnable. The next day, at the board meeting, Amara presented her case with the same fire she'd shown on the plane. The room was silent as she recounted the incident, her voice steady but laced with the weight of her experience. She didn't just demand accountability, she demanded systemic change. The board approved her proposal unanimously, a small victory in a much larger war. Weeks later, Amara received an email from Lila, the flight attendant. It was short but heartfelt, thanking her for her courage and sharing that the crew had begun discussing bias in their own training sessions. Attached was a photo of Lila and her team, smiling, with a note, "We're learning, thanks to you." Amara closed her laptop, a quiet pride settling in her chest. She'd turned a moment of humiliation into a spark for change, not just for herself, but for those who'd come after her. The world hadn't changed overnight, but she'd carved out a piece of it, made it a little fairer, a little kinder. And for now, that was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.